religious tension. When the press got involved in this, and in this case it was the blogs of New York Times, which were written by an Indian journalist, they investigated. They found that out of the 320, I don't know the exact number, but 323 I think, requests by the government to take down posts on Facebook and Twitter, 264 were actually relating to political personalities. They were not relating to issues which might stoke up religious tension. So it was very clear that the Minister for IT and Communications didn't want to see the Prime Minister or the leader of the Congress Party being put across in a cartoonish manner. This was something which the entire social networking and IT space in India pounced upon. And the minister had to backtrack, he had to try and modify his words, and finally he realized that with every word he said he was complicating his case even more, and now he is silent. And his junior minister is now standing up and saying, no, of course we don't believe in censorship. So what I'm saying is that the positive side of India is that nonsense is not brooked by the populace at large. We have an extremely vibrant people who are extremely conscious of their rights. We have grasped new technologies with amazing alacrity. As I said, 720 million people using cell phones. That's an incredible force. We have overcome one of what was seen as a big evil in the past, which was the brain drain, Indians going abroad, becoming doctors, becoming engineers, joining Wall Street, etc. The names were mentioned by Dato Krohana, I don't need to repeat them. But what we've seen in the last 5 or 7 years as growth has taken off in India is a huge cross-fertilization between those people who went to the West and those who came back, and those who remained here. And therefore we have an extremely vibrant corporate culture, a corporate culture which includes multinationals from abroad, multinationals that are grown in India, and startups of every kind and description. So I'm going to conclude by saying, by repeating that this incredible tension between a very backward-looking, control-seeking political class and a democracy and a polity that seeks its own empowerment and is willing to confront the governmental forces, combined with the financial misgovernment of our country, is creating a dynamic which I think, or hope, given where I come from in terms of ideology, a situation where we are going to see an India able to worship Lakshmi, not just a photograph, but in terms of real gold. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very, I think, honest assessment on India. And I think much has been said this morning about, whether one is being too negative or positive about the state of being. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding regarding this. And just because you're criticizing doesn't make you less patriotic about your country or your community. And I think, in fact, everyone has a duty to speak up and to say the truth, whether that may sound good or whether they may not sound bad. And I think everyone is duty bound to stand by that. But I think before I open to the floor, I think I'm going to pose to you a quick question. I think it's very interesting. And you're saying that we are seeing the seeds of, steps which are being taken to further democratize India, to close the gap between the haves and the have-nots in many respects. But question is, in a situation where there is massive growth and massive urbanization, how fast can democracy translate into good governance, into the adherence of rule of law, especially in a situation in India where I think the social fabric could be quite fragile?
No, actually, I'm going to start with the last thing that you said, which is the social fabric. The social fabric of India is extremely strong. Um, families are extremely strong, and I think the social fabric of any country really begins with the family. It's sometimes a mystery to me when I come out of my very privileged home and walk in the slum areas of India to see that there isn't much tension between the classes. So social fabric is very strong. I think there are huge challenges in terms of democratizing in India, and I think the basic challenge is of devolution of power, bringing power down from the center to the states, from the states to the districts, and from the districts to the villages. And we're actually beginning to see this happen at every level. Village elections are becoming more important. District elections are becoming more important. We now are beginning to see planning at the district level. What we need is an overhaul of the financial and fiscal routes by which money flows down, first from the center to the state. Fiscal and financial power is still too controlled, and I think that is in fact lagging the democratic process. The democratic process is very strong, and it's growing very, very rapidly.
So can we, have questions from the floor? Please introduce yourself. Here's how we're going to start. We're going to take 3 questions at any given time, and then we're going to allow the speaker to answer, and then we're going to start over again. If I can, I think the gentleman at the back came first, so if you could just put your question through the speakers.
All right. Thank you, sir, for that wonderful view in India. I had the privilege to stay in India for 6 years of my life, as my father was a diplomat from Bangladesh in India. Well, as we see, as Kolkata is the last communist state that has gone down in India, Anna Hazare has ended his movement. Opposition is capitalizing on his idea of corruption, anti-corruption movement. And we can see much movement in West Bengal and as well as West North Indian side, that Assam and Orissa is going through a move movement. We can see that as well. And companies like Walmart and Tesco are not getting into the market as because the small market economy is stopping them, but the government wants them. Do you think India was better off as a socialist democracy than as a democracy which it's now going through? Sir, thank you.
All right, the next question, gentleman right there.
Hi, my question is more on physical requirements of India, given that much of its problems is macroeconomic problems and inflation and foreign exchange rates. So it seems to me that a big opportunity is in physical long-term infrastructure, but if you had to prioritize, which type of infrastructure do you think is most pressing? Physical, such as power, water, telcos, and transportation, or social, education, healthcare, and social security? Thank you.
All right, next question, please.
Okay, I'm going to be a bit long-winded. I think let her answer.
Okay, all right, so we'll let the lady in red.
Okay, good afternoon, sir. My question is about this China and India. The rise of China and India has always been a talk about issue. So what is your take on Chindia, as well as the conflict between China and India and the border dispute in the areas of Arunachal Pradesh? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, with regard to the first question, firstly I want to correct you on 2 counts. The first is that though the communist government of West Bengal has given way to a more secular government, I say secular because communism is just another religion, this has not happened in Kerala, and in Kerala we still have a communist government. Secondly, on the point of Anna Hazare has not given up his movement. He is calling for widespread fasts on January the 1st. He's possibly shifting his second fast from New Delhi to Bombay because New Delhi is too cold on January the 1st. And I think also politically it's more important now to broad base his movement and to move it out from the political center to the commercial center. So as far as Walmart and Tesco are concerned, I'm actually quite struck by how our Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, has stuck to his guns. And it seemed as though he had retreated in the face of political opposition. But again, just day before yesterday, he said, we have only put it back, and I'm going to bring it back again. I think he's going to bring it back again in the next session of Parliament. I think he made a tactical error in that while the Parliament was in session, this was something that was announced as a cabinet decision. That was stupid. When the Parliament was in session, it should have been taken up in Parliament. Or it's something that the cabinet should have declared when the Parliament was not in session. As an economist, he knows only too well that we have between 30 and 40% of our fruits and vegetables rot before they leave, before they reach the customer. He knows that we are a capital short country and that there's no way that we are going to be able to find enough capital in our country to make those kind of cold chains possible without help, both in terms of capital and in terms of technology from abroad. So I think that's something that's going to happen. It's got to happen at the right political time. Right now, the opposition is translating its role in the most stupid and literal translation of the word opposition, means that if the government says something, you oppose it. So that's what they're doing. But ironically, the BJP, which is the largest chunk of the opposition, was somebody who talked about foreign direct investment in retail when they were in power. So I think this is going to go through. This brings me to the other point, whether India was better off as a socialist state or as a more capitalist, progressive one. I think it's apparent from what I've said as to which way my inclinations lie. But more importantly, even if you can grow at 7% rather than 10%, that's clearly a lot better than growing at 3.5%. And we're certainly a much more vibrant, much happier, much more outward-looking nation today than we were 20 years ago or 30 years ago when I was growing up. So I'm clearly in favor, not of any backward movement, but of a much, much more opening up of all those sectors which are still closed, which include agriculture. Now, the second part of the question, which is more important? The social infrastructure or the physical infrastructure? I think it's like, it's like choosing between your first son and your second. It's an impossible choice, and I don't think that it's one that we need to make, because, but if I had to absolutely choose, I think I would choose the first, which is the social infrastructure, because I think that what we're seeing in India is the fruits of a more democratic nation, and so if you improve your social infrastructure, you make people more conscious of the world out there, of what is possible to them, of their rights as citizens of a democracy, then you're going to see more investment in infrastructure. You're going to see more demands for change. So if I had to choose, I would choose social infrastructure. On the third question about Chindia, I think it's virtually impossible to put the two together. I know very little about China. I know that it's a booming economy. I read a lot about the structural imbalances in China. I would believe them. I would believe that any country which can grow credit by 50% in 1 year, which is the figure I have for what happened in 2008, it's impossible to invest 50% more in year one than you did in year zero without introducing huge structural imbalances into the system. And I think if we're talking about the world becoming more and more reliant on information, then a country which spends billions of dollars on filtering what people can read on Google is not a country which is giving enough importance to information. But beyond that, I know nothing about China. As far as the border disputes are concerned, they're ongoing. I don't think they're a source of great worry. I don't see a war between India and China. This is just a part of China's overall strategy. Create a few irritants, worry somebody who's your strategic opponent, and it's not a major issue as far as I'm concerned. But I'm not a geopolitical expert, so I'm not going to, I'm not going to stand up and defend that if somebody says, no, there's going to be a great India-China war over the Himalayas. Maybe so. I don't see it happening.
Just a quick question. I want to build on the question that the gentleman asked earlier about the growing inflation, because that's one of the things that's quite bothering a lot of market investors. So what does India need to do about that?
Well, the inflation has come about clearly as a result of huge structural imbalances in our country. And the real source of inflation, the spark of inflation, has been food inflation. And this takes me back to what I had said earlier, which is that we've had liberalization in the industrial sector, and we've had liberalization in terms of our overseas commerce. We've not had liberalization of agriculture. And just three little things. Firstly, the right to sell land is hugely constrained. The right to buy land is even more constrained. So there were land ceilings, there are restrictions on people from one state buying land in another state. So you didn't see agriculture becoming more efficient at the level of ownership. Secondly, you didn't see agriculture becoming more efficient at the level of trade, because if you are a farmer working within a very small area, which is smaller than a district, sort of a sub-district, you are forced to sell the produce through a market committee. The market committee has a monopoly on buying produce. You can imagine the kind of inefficiencies that introduces into the whole system. That is over and above the much larger systemic inefficiencies in terms of transport, distribution, refrigeration, power, etc. So what we're really seeing is not a monetary phenomenon, though I believe that inflation is everywhere, it's a monetary phenomenon, but it's also a structural phenomenon. And therefore it's not going to go away in a hurry unless you have a rapid cooling of growth. And because the structural inefficiencies are not going to be wished away, because the way in which we govern our nation is not going to go away overnight, we are going to have a rapid cooling of growth. And that is the kind of crisis which I think we're going to have. And that is going to require people to go back to thinking of our structural problems and not think that 9% growth is something that happens because you're happy and because Bernanke is printing lots of money, but you've got to tackle what's happening on the ground. And that kind of rethink is called for, and it's going to happen.
All right, thank you. So the gentleman right there.
All right. First of all, thank you, Mr. Mohit, for your wonderful insights of India. But then I would have appreciated even more if you would have touched more on the cultural fabric of India. The earlier speaker actually mentioned that India is very complex, but I tell you that India is very complex. How many of you know that India is actually made of like patchwork of like different nations, different states?
Your question.
Hold on, let me just finish this. When I say different states with different languages, different writings, as in like different characters altogether, different food. People in Tamil Nadu eat thosai, people in Punjab eat chapati, people in Kerala eat puttu. I'm talking about totally different states with different culture. India is, you mentioned that India is a nation where like 50% of the dropout of 50% in the primary schools. But the same nation actually produces world champions in spelling bee and like world champions in chess competitions. Why is that such disparity? Is it because of huge population, corruption? That's what usually we think. But in my personal opinion, through my research about India and also my extensive visit to India, the root problem is actually the complexity of India. Because when you go to India, people do not address themselves as Indians first. They address themselves as Malayalis first, Telugus, Tamils. They address themselves by the state first. So the ultimate root problem for India, which is stopping her from moving forward, is actually the complexity. So my question is going to be like very unpopular in Malaysia, but this question is a very popular question in India. Do you think the states in India should just separate and be independent on their own? And India should act as a bloc, so they can be like, the states can run in a more efficient way, they can attract their own foreign investment, and they can compete among each other to move forward. Thank you very much.
All right, next question, please.
David Sim again. The question is, I'm a great admirer of your Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, who is an Oxford-trained economist and Indian central banker. Now, currently under his government, is India a totally free market economy, or is it still a state centrally planned economy? Thank you.
All right, can we have the gentleman right there?
Hi, thank you. I would like to introduce myself with some Bollywood style.
I line up first of all.
I'm sorry, can we have the gentleman right
first
there?
of all, then we come.
But it's okay, let
Okay, all right.
surface.
I just have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
See, since India is coming number one in the world, why so many Indians come to Malaysia to work in the mama shop? You know, I can see walk over mama shop, many come here to work, and then we are talking about India is becoming number one. What is this all about?
All right, thank you. The gentleman in pink, thank you very much for waiting, and thank you very much for your grace.
No, never mind. So let me introduce myself in some Bollywood style, sir. My name is Muhammad Rizwan, and today I would like to represent myself from Malaysia Sport Industry Entrepreneur Association. So the question will be about sport. I would like to advise and some opinion on the sport fitness activity and sport business opportunity in India, other than cricket and yoga. And what do you think are the opportunity? And second one, who to goes for a reliable partnership and network opportunity? Thank you.
All right. Okay, can we have one final question from the gentleman right at the back?
Hello, hi sir. I'm Aizat from YCM. I do have a question for you. You were talking about the political leadership in India. There's been, I don't think this is a joke, there's been a suggestion for the celebrities of India icons like King Shah Rukh Khan, Amitabh Bachchan, and also superstar Rajnikant to take the political leadership in India and of course lead people from what they are currently now to better heights. So what is your opinion on this? Thank you very much.
All right, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I could spend many hours talking about the complexity of India. As somebody who's worked in the cultural field for half of my life. But I don't think that that was the main reason for being here today. In terms of dealing with complexity, I think the best way of dealing with complexity is something that India is learning more and more, which is that you need to democratize and you need to loosen up. And if India was a more rigid state, then this complexity would already have created huge political problems. The fact that it hasn't is because we have an open, relatively democratic system. It is true that a Malayali is a Malayali and a Punjabi is a Punjabi, but the barriers in India have broken down a lot. And somebody talked about Bollywood, and it's quite ironic that Bollywood is in Mumbai, which is the state of Maharashtra, but Bollywood is ruled both in terms of talent as well as in terms of producers by people from my home state, which is the northwestern state of Punjab, which was divided in two, half of which is now in Pakistan. With Bollywood, the one thing that strikes you, if you've lived in India for the last 30 years, 30 years ago, if I traveled from Delhi, which is largely a Hindi or a Punjabi-speaking state, to Bangalore, to Calcutta, or to Chennai, nobody understood a word of Hindi. Today, they all do. And that's not because of an official language policy, it's because of Bollywood. So it's because of cinema, it's because of a popular medium that India now actually is beginning to have a language which unites it. And the lesson from that is that if you leave people alone, they find a way in which to work through complexity. I would say that if there's a national food of India today, it's either the dosa, which comes from Tamil Nadu, or the pizza, which comes from a state which I don't think is in India, or the noodles, which I think comes from the other part of Chindia. So India has learned to deal with complexity. Our politicians have not quite learned to deal with complexity in terms of what I talked about. And this is going directly to the question about Whether India should break up and become a union, I don't think it really matters. I think we do need to move in the direction of greater devolution of power to the states. The states are becoming more and more politically powerful every day. Our chief ministers in the states are becoming very, very powerful personalities. And if anything, politically, I think it's almost now becoming a threat because it's leading to difficulties in forming a really strong government at the center. But I think that's better than having a monolithic government at the center. It needs to now start happening in financial terms as well, which is the states need to start figuring out ways in which they can generate an increasing percentage of their own resources. Today, the bulk of taxes are collected at the center, and the center has a formula by which it distributes those taxes, which then creates a relationship between the chief ministers and the finance minister, where the finance minister is the king and the chief ministers are people who have to come and beg for money. This is not great, and this has to change. As regards whether these Punjabis or these Pathans should rule India, well, firstly, you know, India is a free country. Let them go out and get the votes and let them become prime minister, and we'll have to deal with it. If you ask me about their abilities to understand the complex issues of governing a nation, I can certainly speak for one of them who has been a very close friend. We grew up in the same city, we worked in the same theater group, and we had many Eid lunches together. Shah Rukh Khan, he's a very, very bright boy, but he doesn't know anything about governance, he knows nothing about finance, and he knows very little about democracy. I would be the first person to tell him, Shah Rukh, please don't become Prime Minister of our nation. As regards sports, yoga is not a sport, yoga is a way of life, and the physical postures that you see are only 1/8 of what yoga is about. Sports industry in India, that's an interesting one. And like you, I don't like the fact that cricket so completely dominates our sports culture, and I would like to see a lot more sports happening. I think the one thing that has happened in India over the last 5 or 7 years with the globalization of television is the emerging popularity of football. Football has become increasingly popular in India. And what I'm seeing is that among the elite of India, the children who go to expensive private schools, my son's friends, very few of them have time for cricket any longer. They'd much rather be playing soccer. So if I were to name one sport where I think there's an opportunity for Malaysia, which has long been a soccer-playing nation, which has very strong clubs, which has a culture, I would say, look at football, get into football. Who the players are, who you should align with, I don't know the answer to that. There are chambers of commerce, there's your embassy over there, but if you're really interested, you know, I'm sure I could ask around, and you know, you're welcome to contact me. And